A very good morning to my dear fellow friends and also Madam Zakia. So my name is THANUSHA SUPPARAU. I'll be presenting to you chapter 4, Abnormal Psychology. So in this chapter, there are 3 modules and also 6 objectives. So let us look into it. So the first module will be normal versus abnormal, making the distinction. How can we distinguish normal from abnormal behavior? What are the major perspectives on psychological disorders used by mental health professionals? And also, what are the major categories of psychological disorders? Next module will be the major psychological disorders. So we will be looking into what are the major psychological disorders. And the last module will be psychological disorders in perspective. So how prevalent are psychological disorders, and also what are the indicator signals a need for the help of a mental health practitioner? So this is what we will be covering in this chapter 4. So next, we will be looking into our first objective, which is how can we distinguish normal from abnormal behavior? So here we will like to define what is abnormality. So abnormality as a deviation from what is average behavior. So behaviors that are unusual or rare in a society or culture are considered abnormal. Abnormality is also as an deviation from ideal behavior in relation to some kind of ideal or morally appropriate standard toward which most people are striving. Abnormality would also be defined as producing a sense of personal discomfort. So behavior is considered abnormal if it produces a sense of personal distress, anxiety, or guilt in an individual, or if it's harmful to others in some way. Abnormality as the inability to function effectively. People are unable to function effectively and to adapt to the demands of society are considered abnormal. Abnormality as a legal concept. The distinction between normal and abnormal behavior rests on the definition of insanity, which means that defendants cannot understand the difference between right or wrong at the time they commit a criminal act. So next, what are the major perspectives on psychological disorders used by mental health professionals? So if we look into medical perspective, they assume that psychological causes are the root of psychological disorders. If we view in psychoanalytic perspective, they argue that psychological disorders stem from childhood conflicts. In behavioral perspective, it can be assumed that abnormal behaviors are learned responses. Via cognitive perspective, it can be assumed that cognitions, people's thoughts and beliefs, are central to psychological disorders. Also, through humanistic perspective, it is emphasized that people's responsibility for their own behavior and the need to self-actualize. Last but not least is the views on socio-cultural perspective. It can be assumed that behavior is shaped by family, society, and also culture. So next, what are the major categories of psychological disorders? So there are few categories which I'll explain roughly. Okay. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is the 5th edition, is the most widely used system to classify and define psychological disorders for more than 200 disorders. So the first psychological disorder that we will be looking into is anxiety. So anxiety is the problem in which anxiety impedes daily functioning. So example of anxiety is like generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and also phobic disorder. And next psychological disorder is somatic symptom. Somatic symptom is psychological difficulties which is displayed through psychological problems such as conversion disorder. Other than then will be dissociative disorder. So dissociative disorder is where the splitting apart of crucial parts of personality that are used integrated. Example would be like multiple personality disorder and also dissociative amnesia. Next will be psychological disorders that involve mood. So this is where emotions of depression or euphoria that are so strong, they intrude on our everyday living, such as major depressive disorder, and also bipolar disorder. Next will be neurocognitive disorders such as Alzheimer. And next will be schizophrenia spectrum. So these declines in functioning, thought and language disturbances, perception disorders, emotional disturbances, and withdrawal from others, such as delusional disorder. So the next psychological disorder will be a personality disorder. This is where problems that create little personal distress but that lead to an inability to function as a normal member of society, such as antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. Other than that, psychological disorder also involves sexual disorder, which is problems related to sexual arousal from unusual objects and problems related to functioning, such as paraphilic disorders and also sexual dysfunction. More other than that, that we also have substance-related disorders, whereby problems related to drug dependence and also abuse, such as alcohol, cocaine, hallucinogens, and also marijuana. So what are the major psychological disorders that we will be exploring more in depth? Involves anxiety disorders, somatic symptom disorders, dissociative disorders, mood disorders, schizophrenia, personality disorders, disorders that impact childhood, and also other disorders. So firstly, we'll be exploring on anxiety disorders. So the first type of anxiety disorder that I'll be explaining on will be phobic disorder. Phobic disorder is a type of anxiety disorder characterized by an intense and irrational fear of a specific object, situation, or activity. People with such phobias, they often go to avoid the object because of their fear, and also their fear will interfere in their normal functioning and also their daily life. So there are a few types of phobia that we tend to develop. So the first phobia will be agoraphobia, where we fear of unfamiliar or crowded places. Other than that will be specific phobias, fear of specific object, place, or situation. Also animal type phobia, we will be phobic to certain type of specific animals or insects. Natural environment type phobic, certain events or situations in the natural type is what we fear of. Also situational type phobia, we will fear to get onto public transportation or tunnels or also bridges. So next is blood injection injury type phobia, fear of blood injury and also injections. Lastly will be social phobia, fear of being judged or embarrassed by others. So the next type of anxiety disorders is panic disorder. Panic disorder basically occurs from a few seconds to also several hours it can last to. There is no specific triggers, but the symptoms of panic disorder will be heart palpitations, shortness of breath, unusual amount of sweating, faintness, dizziness, gastric sensation, and sometimes a sense of imminent death. So after such panic attack, certain people will feel very exhausted. So next disorder will be obsessive compulsive disorder. So here people will be disturbed by unwanted thoughts, calling like obsessions, and also they feel like they must carry out this certain type of activity, which they feel like so driven to perform that. Next disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. So generalized anxiety disorder, the victim tend to experience a very long-term persistent anxiety and also uncontrollable worry. So they tend to develop symptoms such as muscle tension, headache, dizziness, heart palpitations, and also insomnia. So the causes of anxiety disorder, we can say these are the main causes that a person can experience anxiety disorder, which will be mainly the first factor that contributes to having these things is genetic factors, and also an overreactive autonomic nervous system. And also the causes will be grow out of inappropriate and inaccurate thoughts and beliefs about circumstances in a person's world, and environmental factors also influence a person in having anxiety disorders. So next, we will be moving on to somatic symptom disorders, which is a psychological difficulties that take on a physical form, which there is no any medical causes. So the first disorder we will be talking here about is the illness anxiety disorder, where a person tend to have a constant fear of an illness and a preoccupation with the health. They believe that everyday aches and pains are the symptom of a very dread disease. So they tend to feel like that. So next disorder will be the conversion disorder, which involve a physical disturbance such as inability to see or hear or to move an arm or leg. However, the cause of the psychological disturbance is purely psychological. So next is dissociative disorder. So dissociative disorder is basically characterized as the separation of different facets of a personality that are normally integrated and work together. The common thread among dissociative disorders is that they allow the people to escape from some anxiety producing situations. So the first disorder is dissociative identity disorder. So this is also known as multiple personality disorder, where they will have multiple personalities in their body, displaying characteristics of two or more distinct personalities, identities. So the diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder is very controversial. And next disorder we will be exploring on dissociative amnesia, which involves an actual loss of information from memory and typically results from a psychological cause. Individuals cannot recall their names and also are unable to recognize parents and other relatives, and they don't even know their addresses. Dissociative phagia is a form of amnesia in which a person leaves home suddenly and assumes a new personality. So after a period of time, as days, months pass by, they sometimes even take years to realize that they are in a strange place and they completely forgot the time when they are wandering here. Okay, so next is mood disorders. So mood disorders is basically a disturbance in emotional experiences that are strong enough to interfere with everyday living. In extreme cases, a mood may become a life-threatening. In other cases, it may cause a person to lose touch with reality. So the first disorder is major depressive disorder, which is a severe form of depression that interferes with concentration, decision-making, and also sociability. Women are twice as likely to experience major depression as men are. So the usual symptoms that people who are suffering with major depressive disorder may experience is feeling useless, worthless, and lonely, and thinking that future is hopeless. They might even lose appetite and have no energy. They may even experience such feelings for months or even years. They also will cry uncontrollably and have sleep disturbances and be at a risk for suicide. So next is mania and bipolar disorder. Mania is an extended state of intense wild elation. People experiencing mania feel intense happiness, power in vulnerability, and also energy. Bipolar disorder is a condition known as manic depressive disorder. The swings between highs and lows may occur a few days apart or may alternate over a period of years. Bipolar disorder periods of depression are usually longer than periods of mania. So the causes for mood disorders are usually genetic and biological factors, internal unconscious conflicts, environmental factors, and also might be influenced by cognitive and emotional factors. Lastly is the learned helplessness. So next is schizophrenia. So schizophrenia is a class of disorders in which severe distortion of reality occurs. The usual symptoms of schizophrenia is thinking, perception, and emotion may deteriorate. The individual may withdraw from social interaction, and the person may display bizarre behavior. They often have delusions. They may have hallucinations. The experience of perceiving things that do not actually exist. They also show a lack of emotion, in which even the most dramatic events produce little or no emotional response. They also tend to have a little interest in others and excessive daydreaming. So the causes of having schizophrenia is due to genetic factors, and the brains of people with schizophrenia may have a biochemical imbalance. They they also may have over attention to stimuli in the environment, and they also are vulnerable to the stresses in their life. So the next disorder is personality disorder we will be exploring on. It is characterized by a set of inflexible behavior patterns that keeps a person from functioning appropriately. Firstly, it is about antisocial personality disorder. Individuals with this disturbance show no regard for the moral and rules of society or the right of others. Upon closer examination, they turn out to be manipulative and also deceptive. Moreover, they lack of any guilt or anxiety about their wrongdoing. They often be impulsive and have the lack of ability to withstand frustration. So next, we will move on to borderline personality disorder. So people with borderline personality disorder, they have problems in regulating their emotions and thoughts, display impulsive and reckless behavior, and they also have an unstable relationship with others. They also have difficulty in developing a clear understanding of who they are. They also tend to rely on relationship with others to define their identity. Even a minor rejection by others is very devastating for them. Generally, they distrust others and they have difficulty in controlling their anger. Their emotional volatility leads to impulsive and self-destructive behavior. They often feel empty and alone, and they also have difficulty in cooperating with others. They may form intense, sudden, one-sided relationships in which they demand the attention of another person, and they feel angry when they don't receive it. They also may have a background in which others criticize their emotional reaction, and they may have not learned to regulate their emotions effectively. The causes of having personality disorders is an inability to experience emotions appropriately to problems in family relationship, and they also have antisocial personalities coming from lower socioeconomic groups. So next, we will move on to disorders that impact childhood, which firstly is the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, to simplify. This occurs due to having the inattention, impulsiveness, a low tolerance of frustration, and generally a great deal of inappropriate activity. This also interferes with their daily functioning, and it might be exhausting to their parents and teachers and even their peers to find them difficult to deal with the children of having ADHD. So next is autism spectrum disorder, where a severe developmental disability that impairs one's ability to communicate. Usually, autism appears in the first 3 years and typically continues throughout their life. They might have difficulties in both verbal and non-verbal communication, and they may avoid social contact. So these are the other disorders, which are firstly psychoactive substance use disorder, which is a problem that arises from the use and abuse of drugs. So next is neurocognitive disorders, problems with a biological cause that affects thinking and behavior, such as Alzheimer's disorder. Also, not forgetting the eating disorders such as anorexia nervosa, bulimia, and also binge eating disorder. Lastly, we would come down to sexual disorders, in which one's sexual activity is unsatisfactory, include sexual desire disorders, sexual arousal disorders, and also paraphilic disorders, which is a typical sexual activities that may include non-human objects or non-consenting partners. How prevalent are psychological disorders? So the most prevalent disorder in Malaysia is anxiety disorder, followed by mood disorder and also other mental disorders. The source taken for this prevalence is from National Health and Morbidity Survey 2019. Among adults in Malaysia, it is estimated that psychological disorders are around 29.2%. 1 in every 3 Malaysians will experience a mental disorder at some point of their lives. What are the indicators needed for the help of a mental health practitioner? So these are the indicators, which is long-term feelings of distress that interferes with your sense of well-being, competence, and ability to function effectively in daily activities. The occasions in which you experience overwhelming high stress accompanied by feelings of inability to cope with the situation, prolonged depression or feelingness of hopeless, especially when they do not have a clear cause, the withdrawal from other people, even if you feel the thoughts of harming yourself or suicidal, you should also contact the mental health practitioner. A chronic physical problem for which no physical cause can also be one of the causes. A fear or phobia that prevents you from engaging with your everyday activities. Feelings that other people are unable to get to you or talking and plotting against you. Inability to interact effectively with others, preventing the development of friendships and loving relationships. So all these are the indicators that signals you to get the help of a mental health practitioner. So lastly, to conclude my presentation today, in conclusion, psychological abnormalities are a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that can significantly impact on an individual's life. While there is no any single cause of psychological abnormalities, a variety of biological, psychological, and social factors can contribute to their development. The diagnosis and treatment of psychological abnormalities is a complex process that requires a thorough understanding of the individual's symptom, history, and functioning. Despite the challenges associated with psychological abnormalities, there is a growing body of research that is leading to the development of effective treatments. With the early intervention and appropriate support, many individuals with psychological abnormalities can live fulfilling and productive lives. It is important for us to remember that psychological abnormalities are not a sign of weakness or character flaw. They are simply a manifestation of a complex interplay between biology, psychology, and the environment. As such, they deserve to be treated with compassion and understanding. Therefore, thank you so much.